Welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast, where your host, Josh Sweeney, will give you, the business leaders, HR professionals, and company culture aficionados, the knowledge you need to take your company culture to the next level.
Hi, my name's Josh Sweeney, and welcome to the Epic Company Culture Podcast. I first want to thank Prototype Prime for hosting us. If you haven't checked out Prototype Prime in Peachtree Corners, Georgia, they're a technology co-working space, and we were working out of their amazing and beautiful podcast room to bring this to you. So just want to throw a thanks out to those guys and that team, guys and gals in that team. So thank you for that. Today's podcast is all about how culture attracts A players. So how does your company culture not only attract, but attracts and retains A players? I'm going to tell you a few different stories, share some examples, and talk, just give you some things to think about around the A players on your team, how to attract them, how to keep them, and we'll go from there. So the first thing around A players is attracting them. That is one of the most difficult things. How, as a company, do you convey the message you need in a marketing sense, right, on your website, in your feel, in your Instagram, whatever it might be, in order to get A players to come in? And real quick, if you're not familiar with the term A players, think of it as the top talent, right? The best of the best. These are the people everybody wants on their team. They're collaborative, cohesive, have the knowledge, and they just stand head and shoulders above everybody else. I don't have any studies to reference, but in my experience, I would say an A player is that person who does 10 times more than the next person in that position, right? So if you want to compare A and B, that A player can just naturally get 10 times more done than a B player. So the first way that I see people attract A players is through referrals. If you already have A players and top talent on your team, then they are going to refer other A players. Now, they are not going to refer A players if they don't absolutely love your company culture. They're not going to go to their A player friend and say, hey, I heard you're moving. I heard you're, thinking about making a move and going to work for somebody else. We need you to come over here, right? We want you on the team. So it's not only about attracting those A players through referrals, but you have to make sure that the A players you have love the culture that your company provides, or they're not going to give that referral. One of the places that I've seen this happen that's a total game changer is I am in an organization called the Entrepreneur Organization, EO. So EO is for entrepreneurs. Generally, to qualify, you have to own about 30% of your organization or more. So you're typically a founder or a large shareholder of the organization. And on top of that, you have to have $1 million a year in revenue or more. Now, most people don't know this, but only roughly 4% of companies founded in the U.S. meet the $1 million mark or ever break that $1 million mark. So it's a pretty high bar. Now, I was the membership chair for 2 years for EO, and we found two different things that happen when going out and finding these our members, right? These are A players, top talent in the entrepreneur space. And what happened in membership was we tried to do some marketing. We tried to attract people to the website, and we just didn't get the members that we were looking for. In fact, we barely got any referrals, right? We barely got any people coming in and filling out the lead forms. Now, you can say that's for, how the marketing was done or whatever you want to do, but there was some definite trends. Now, we had the flip side, which was the referrals. Now, pretty much everybody, I'm in the Atlanta chapter, pretty much everybody that has come in to the Atlanta chapter has come from a referral. So not only do we have top talent, top entrepreneurs that are in the 4%, group of companies founded over that $1 million mark, but they also love EO so much that they're going to refer other entrepreneurs and other friends of theirs that own businesses. So it was really a twofold, a two-factor piece around not only the attraction through the referrals, but also the ability for EO and the organization, the entrepreneur organization, to provide enough value for them to go out to all of the other A players, A entrepreneurs, I would say, and attract them into the organization and really vet for them. So when you're looking at attracting A players in your organization, think through what's happening to not only bring them in, and the mechanisms around that, maybe through a referral plan, but also what, if that's not happening, why? Why are the A players in your organization not referring, not bringing in other friends, not bringing in other top talent that they could definitely be reaching out to? Now, when it comes to attracting A players, the next step after attracting them is bringing them on board, hiring them. So what I generally find is that you have to really make sure that during that hiring process, that person that comes in, that A player that you're going through the interview process with, is meeting and visualizing and greeting and understanding that there are other A players on the team. There is nothing that will make a player run faster than walking into an environment, a culture, a company culture, where they can immediately tell that they are not working with like-minded individuals. Okay. So when your team is doing an interview, they have to make sure that they're making the right introductions, giving the right information to an A player, and that you have the culture that can back them up. So not only does it start with attracting, but it goes into hiring them. And from hiring, you get into the retention piece of that. If you can't retain A players, then it's a waste of time to attract A players. So in talking about this, what I want to highlight is the retention strategy around those. What are some things that happen? We're just going to cover this lightly in this podcast, but what happens with an A player? What happens from a retention perspective with them? First of all, is that A player building a relationship with the team? If you have an A player, but they're off on an island by themselves, maybe they're a remote employee, right? They don't come into the headquarters. They're in another city, another state, whatever it might be, and they're not building a relationship with the team. Well, then it might be challenging, might not, to continue to retain that A player, because they can also go be a A player somewhere else very easily as a remote employee. There's a lot of challenges with remote people, but with the A player, they have to also feel like they're working with A players in the other location, right? If you have to collaborate. So first of all, are you building a team of A players? Are you building relationships in between those people and in those interactions, and are they collaborating? Because if an A player, even if there's 10 A players on the team, if they're not talking to each other, it doesn't matter. They don't feel like they're working with each other. They don't know each other. They're not a team. They're off doing their own thing based on maybe whatever that job role is. Now, what you're trying to inject into the culture a little bit is also a certain level of fear that if they were to leave, they would end up worse off than they are now, right? If you have an amazing company culture of A players and great relationships between all of those people, then the employees are going to be more hesitant to leave your organization. Why? Because they can end up somewhere where, they did a great interview, they did a walkthrough, they thought it was a great place to work, but they ended up finding out it was a bunch of C players and a terrible culture on the back end, right? There is a certain level of fear in switching jobs for most people. And you don't want to downgrade, right? It's kind of like, you used to have a car that you bought in high school and now you drive an Audi and you probably don't want to go back, right? There's a certain fear around that. Like, well, I'm used to a certain level of amenities. I'm, in the same way I'm used to a certain level of talent and I'm used to a certain culture. So when it really comes to retaining those A players, you have to think about and go through the strategy of why do they want to stay here? How can I keep them here? How can I build those relationships? So in wrap up, what I'd like for you to do is really think about the A players on your team. How did you get them? How are you retaining them? And how do you plan on using that same process to go attract other A players for your organization?
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of the Epic Company Culture Podcast with Josh Sweeney. If you enjoyed this content, please subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. For additional content and transcripts, visit epicculture.co. If you have questions or topics you would like us to address or expand on, tweet us at epicculture1 or email at podcast@epicculture.co.